The pain came suddenly and devastatingly. Without warning, a cold blade pierced through the young man's left side, a mark of an unthinkable betrayal. Standing before him, the leader, with a sinister smile, did not hide his shamelessness. He casually justified that sacrificing one person for the remaining 4 to survive was a reasonable calculation, and hoped the young man wouldn't blame them. Gamel, the one who had just struck, continued to rub salt in the wound with a threatening tone. He explained that the smell of fresh blood in this place would lure monsters, turning his corpse into a feast for them. In excruciating agony, the young man could only scream the traitor's name in rage and despair. Their plan had been meticulously calculated. By eliminating him, the remaining 4 could return safely and divide the entire fortune without having to share an extra portion. The group stood looking down at the prone victim, beginning a charade of blame to soothe their consciences. The woman in the group spoke up, trying to seek agreement from the others. She argued that, in the end, everything that happened was his fault. Although one member showed hesitation, no one actually stood up to stop this crime. They mocked him, the manager of the 7th dice party, who had hired them but never participated in combat. In their eyes, he was just a burden. Maniacal laughter erupted as they came up with one last cruel idea: to squeeze every last bit of value out of him even as he was dying, turning his death into a tool for their escape. Meanwhile, in a hidden corner, another member was on alert, listening for any movement around them. Suddenly remembering something important, he turned to remind Gamel that they had forgotten to take the victim's adventurer license card before leaving. Gamel quickly searched and found the metal card. Taking it was the final step to erase the unfortunate young man's existence. With the card in hand, he coldly declared that now, even if someone found the body, they would never be able to identify this nameless corpse. They believed no one would dare venture into this remote wilderness, but caution was paramount. After all, this Kuguse Mountain was home to a legendary dragon, making the surrounding monsters far more ferocious and powerful. Back in that fateful moment, the young man recalled Gamel's last words. He had admitted that the young man wasn't a bad errand boy, but his usefulness had run out. He grabbed the young man's hair, laughing in his face with a sarcastic thank you for his contribution, while the young man could only endure helplessly. After they were done, the group of 5 casually turned their backs, leaving their former comrade to die at the desolate edge of the forest. Left alone, the young man clutched the earth, rage and resentment surging through every fiber of his being. Bleeding profusely, he screamed in his mind that he didn't want to die, not in such a pathetic way. But then his consciousness began to fade from his body. A feeling of lightness took over, as if he were drifting into the void. He was stunned to realize his body was floating, surrounded by an encompassing darkness. Despair washed over him as he wondered if he was truly dead. After all the effort, all the hardships he had endured, this end was too bitter. But this was not death. A massive, jet-black creature was soaring through the sky, clutching his unconscious body as it flew toward the horizon. Memories of the days before suddenly flooded back. He remembered the feeling of helplessness when he realized there was nothing he could do to help that girl. The old doctor had advised him to prepare for the worst. The news was like a lightning strike. He couldn't believe the cruel reality. Refusing to accept fate, he had screamed in desperation, vowing to do anything, no matter how slim the hope, to save that important girl. And then, the only clue was given: Kuguse Mountain. Hearing that name, his face turned pale. The forbidden zone deep within Kuguse Mountain was a place where death always lurked, a suggestion that sounded like a joke. But the doctor explained that, although extremely dangerous, it was the only place to find the ingredients for a miracle drug that could save her life. To undertake this insane journey, he had sought out the adventurer party, 7th Dice. Their initial reaction was shock and anger at the request to go to Kuguse Mountain. He had to humble himself, promising to follow them as a servant, doing all the menial tasks. He even got on his knees and begged, promising a handsome reward if they found what he needed. Lured by the money, the adventurers' attitude changed. They accepted the risk, as it had been a long time since they had found such a lucrative job. All that effort, that humiliation, stemmed from a steely determination. As long as he could help that girl, no matter how small the hope, he was willing to risk his life. In a daze between life and death, his mind was still on her. He tried to reach into the void, calling out Luke Ella in vain. As consciousness slowly returned, he felt his hand gripping something. Not Lucella's hand, but dry branches. A strange feeling jolted him awake. Something was wrong. He raised a hand to feel his body, and a sense of confusion began to creep in. The hands before his eyes had become strangely small and soft, not at all the calloused hands of a grown man. The truth hit him like a horrifying shock. He screamed in terror when he realized his body had completely transformed. He had turned into a girl. Sitting up abruptly amidst a pile of straw, she was still in shock. Hurriedly checking the fatal wound in her abdomen, she was astonished to find her skin completely healed. The sword that had pierced her moments ago was as if it had never existed. But the surprise about her new body was quickly replaced by utter terror. Casting a shadow over her was a colossal creature, majestic and terrifying. A dragon. She stammered, unable to speak as she faced the legendary creature. It was unmistakable, a flesh-and-blood red dragon. Meanwhile, far away, a fist slammed down on a table in anger, followed by a curse that echoed through the bustling street. Back with the treacherous adventurers, they were gloating over their spoils. The amount of herbs collected from the Dragon's Mountain was beyond their imagination. However, Gamel was still resentful. He regretted missing the most valuable treasure, even though his comrades tried to console him that they had made enough profit. His bottomless greed gnawed at him. He calculated that if he had gotten that item, the reward could have been 4 times larger. They discussed how trading the young man's life for this gold was a profitable deal, though they also admitted they had nearly lost their own lives. A comrade laughed sinisterly, his eyes glinting with a mad frenzy as he agreed with the cruel thought. Suddenly, a random question popped into his head. What was that guy's name again? He realized he couldn't even remember the name of the person they had just killed. The leader turned to ask his companions who still had the victim's adventurer license, which was needed to complete the paperwork or dispose of the evidence. The group gathered around the table, certain that his name must be written on the card. But when they looked at the card, they froze. The word missing, and the mysteriously blacked-out name, along with stats that appeared like a system error, made them cry out in horror. Panic began to spread. If he was still alive and returned, their crime would be exposed. They dreaded how they would face him. The most incomprehensible thing was why he still had HP, still had life in that terrible state, and why his name was hidden. The leader tried to calm them down, reminding them of where they had left him. It was monster territory, the domain of the dragon, a place no one could survive. The woman asserted firmly that he would soon become monster fodder. There was no way he could return. However, the fact that he was still alive at this moment sowed an undeniable seed of unease. The leader narrowed his eyes. Though he claimed it was impossible, he felt something strange was happening. Instead of fear, he decided to turn the tables. He ordered them to watch and wait until the victim's life truly faded, turning their anxiety into a cruel hunting game. He licked his lips, a cunning smile on his face, plotting his next moves for when that moment came. Back in the forest, the giant dragon leaned down to the small girl, excitedly suggesting a celebration for the good deal they had just gotten, leaving her bewildered. The girl jumped, startled, when she was told to sit up. Everything was happening too fast and was too strange for her to adapt. She realized her body was too weak to move. It turned out that recovery magic had been used when she was severely injured, leading to this side effect. The dragon looked at her lying flat and called out the name Lu with concern. She told herself she would die if this continued. Her body's energy had been completely depleted just to close her wounds. Seeing this, the dragon had no choice but to drag her small body along, sighing with worry for the weak creature it had just saved. When she was set down, the girl opened her eyes and was utterly horrified by what was placed right in front of her. It was the corpse of a giant bear, the meal the dragon had brought back to nourish her. Gnawing hunger forced her to try a bite of the raw meat, but her human instincts kicked in strongly. She collapsed on the ground, desperately realizing she needed to eat to live, but eating this was an overwhelming challenge. She vomited violently. A human stomach could not digest such rancid, raw meat. The dragon watched with a worried expression. Understanding, the dragon decided to act. It grabbed the prey and unleashed a blazing stream of fire, roasting the meal in an instant, forcing the girl to quickly dodge the immense heat. Now that the meat was cooked, the girl lunged at it, devouring it without a care for her appearance, her hunger overpowering everything. The giant, smoldering beast was now her only salvation. While eating, she innocently invited the dragon to join her. In response, the dragon gently bent down, lightly nipping at the prey's fur or perhaps affectionately nuzzling the girl. It turned its head to look at her with a puzzled expression, as if unfamiliar with the human way of sharing food. The dragon opened its maw towards the girl, causing her to become terrified. It opened its mouth wide in her direction, and she worried it was about to eat her. It turned out that inside was a piece of meat it was offering to her. The dragon was full. It lay down and began to rest. After she was full, the girl began to think again. This enormous amount of food seemed like a portion for a baby dragon, not a small human. Remembering the rumor that the dragon here was nesting, she curiously looked into the nest but saw no eggs or hatchlings. She lay on the ground, reeking of blood but with a full stomach, feeling exhausted after the survival meal. Her eyes fell upon the shattered pieces of an eggshell lying scattered on the barren, rocky ground. Looking up at the steep cliff where the wind howled, she suddenly understood the tragedy that had occurred here. An ah escaped her lips as the truth began to piece itself together in her mind. She remembered that, just before waking up in this form, she had been called by the name Luculla, a completely unfamiliar name. She wondered if that name was meant for the ill-fated child that should have hatched from that broken egg. A sharp pain shot through her head as the pieces of the truth collided. The dragon had lost its child, and now it saw her as a replacement. She looked at her two hands, thinking. As the dragon approached, the girl flinched in alarm, her survival instincts kicking in at its immense size. The dragon froze, its expression showing clear surprise and hurt at seeing its child, afraid of it. Seeing the girl turn away, the dragon's eyes fell, filled with worry and sadness. But then, the distance was closed as the dragon affectionately rubbed its cheek against hers, making her laugh because it tickled. Its warmth melted away her fear. She realized that, to this lonely creature, she was Luculla, its hope and its comfort. Although there were still many confusing things about her new body, one thing was certain. She was once a stranger, and this dragon had saved her life. She smiled at her gigantic benefactor, accepting this strange twist of fate. And so, Luculla fell peacefully asleep beside her new protector, temporarily setting aside her worries for tomorrow. The dragon was sleeping, but somewhere, something was waiting. Amidst a whiteout of snow, a figure appeared with an exhausted face, eyes shut tight in fatigue as if devoid of all strength. The howling wind carried a harsh warning that amateurs should absolutely not be climbing the mountain at this time. The atmosphere grew heavier as a blunt question echoed, cutting deep into the current dire situation. "Are you about to die?" Like a cruel affirmation of the surrounding danger. In the midst of the freezing blizzard, the trembling boy turned around to find a mysterious girl holding a scepter, standing imposingly before him. With a confident and haughty expression, she declared that this encounter was an extraordinary stroke of luck for him, because, without this intervention, he would have surely become dinner for ravenous monsters before he could freeze to death in the bone-chilling cold of the harsh mountains. The young man raised a hand to cover part of his sweat-drenched face, trying to calm the chaotic emotions surging within him. He spoke, his voice a mix of anxiety and determination, affirming that since they had met, the other could rest assured, like a promise guaranteeing future safety amidst the dire circumstances. A firm declaration rang out, asserting that, at the very least, the other person's life would be protected at all costs. In that instant, the character's eyes flew wide open, pupils shrinking in utter astonishment, as cold sweat broke out upon witnessing something beyond imagination or their deepest fears. The young girl dazedly recalled a peaceful scene under a cool green tree, wondering if it had been just a fleeting dream. But harsh reality pulled her back as she found herself kneeling in a pile of dry straw, her hands clutching a coarse animal hide. Her eyes were bewildered and teary, searching for confirmation that what she had just experienced was an illusion. But the real sensation from her clenching hands denied it all. In her chaotic train of thought, the girl wondered about the source of the irritation welling up inside her. Was it because she had once faced death, or because of the title Daughter of the Dragon that people had labeled her with? Days had passed since she was picked up by the dragon, yet the feeling of discomfort and helplessness relentlessly clung to her, plunging her into unanswered questions. A sense of emptiness enveloped her as she realized the cruel truth about her own past. All the memories of being human that she had cherished until now, bit by bit, had been mercilessly stripped away, leaving a dark and uncertain void in her soul. The girl suddenly let out a surprised sound, raising a hand to her temple in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Standing in the middle of a desolate field, she looked around, naively wondering if the creature had gone hunting or had disappeared somewhere. However, she was unaware that right beside her, a huge, shaggy black shadow was silently present, creating a chilling atmosphere. Suddenly, a giant wild boar with sharp tusks and panting breath appeared right before her, blocking the path. The girl could only clutch her head in utter panic, her whole body frozen before the threat of the black beast staring at her in the middle of the treacherous forest. Darkness enveloped the scene as a hideous monster with countless glowing eyes and jagged teeth appeared, consuming the entire space. The young girl was frozen, her wide-open eyes horrifically reflecting the terrifying image, her mouth agape and speechless, a hand raised in a weak defensive reflex against the imminent danger. Looking closely at the creature before her, one would realize its terrible abnormality. This was not an ordinary beast but a monster variant, with a ferocious appearance and chillingly sharp eyes, suggesting the mortal threat it posed to anyone unlucky enough to encounter it. A piercing scream tore through the air as the girl was thrown into the sky by a terrifying impact. Her face was contorted in fear, tears streaming down in the life-or-death moment, while below, the aggressive wild boar charged past at an incredible speed, leaving her flailing in midair in utter chaos. As the girl panicked before the charging monster, the truth of its origin was revealed. These were monster variants, creatures that had been mutated by the aura emanating from dragons, making them far more ferocious and dangerous than their normal counterparts. Hands swiftly flipped through cards, accompanied by dreadful information about this species of monster. Their power so far exceeded that of ordinary monsters that even the most seasoned adventurers had lost their lives confronting them, turning them into a true nightmare. The wild boar growled, drool dripping from its hideous jaw, signaling an impending attack. The girl flinched, fear evident on her pale face, but her trembling hands still tried to grip a small knife, desperately raising it in a defensive posture against the giant monster. Without hesitation, the beast charged forward at a wind-tearing speed, a sharp hissing sound echoing through the dense forest. A close-up of its sharp fangs looked ready to crush everything, a stark contrast to the girl's face, contorted in horror, as death seemed to be just an inch away. The girl squeezed her eyes shut, her face wrinkled in extreme pain and stress, a tear of fear rolling down her cheek. Around her, the space seemed to tremble with terrifying rumbling sounds, signaling a horrific impact occurring right beside her, threatening to crush her spirit. A powerful stomp from the monster's giant claw struck the ground, creating a violent tremor that shook the earth. It let out a savage roar as it crushed its target underfoot, demonstrating the overwhelming power and brutality of an apex predator. But then, the situation changed abruptly as a giant dragon appeared, dominating the battlefield. One dragon head breathed out a threatening smoke, while another part of it swooped down like a tempest. The small girl stood staring up, completely overwhelmed by the majesty and terrifying power of this legendary creature. The girl's eyes were wide open, her mouth agape and speechless, with sweat breaking out on her forehead from the stress. She stood frozen in the desolate field, completely shocked by the rapid and extraordinary events that had just unfolded before her, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. The rustling of trees and the sound of chewing initially confused the girl, who wondered what the dragon was doing in the bushes. But when she saw the dragon stooped over the carcass of the defeated wild boar, she realized it had just saved her life. With deep gratitude, she tremblingly voiced her thanks to the giant benefactor. The girl was startled when the dragon unexpectedly handed her a warm fur cloak. Holding the gift, she asked in surprise if it was for her. Then, with a moved expression, she turned to offer a more proper thank you to the large yet considerate creature. Putting on the warm cloak, the girl mustered her courage to look up and ask for the dragon's name. While awaiting an answer, her mind also wondered, curious as to what name such a powerful and somewhat caring creature would bear. Seeing a large question mark appear above the dragon's head, the girl disappointedly thought the language barrier prevented it from understanding her. However, at that moment, a name unexpectedly appeared amidst sparkling, magical streams of light. Kefil, like an answer from the void. The name echoed in the silent space, like an invisible confirmation between two different species, marking the beginning of a strange bond between the little girl and the legendary creature. The girl wondered if the light she just saw was the kind of magic that dragons use. Pushing aside her surprise, she looked straight into the great creature's eyes and sincerely thanked Kefil. In response to her gratitude was a surprisingly intimate gesture, as she felt a warmth or a gentle touch, making the distance between them seem to disappear. Kefil, the dragon with gray scales and bright eyes, emitted low growls from its throat with a curious air. It tilted its head to observe the small girl, its gaze becoming gentler and calmer, seemingly assessing this new companion with interest. Suddenly, the dragon turned its back and slithered away, creating a loud noise as its massive body moved. Seeing this, the girl hurriedly chased after it, calling out in alarm as she ran, wondering what had made Kefil leave so abruptly. The scene suddenly descended into chaos as a giant black shadow lunged forward, chasing the small girl who was fleeing for her life through the dense forest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror, her breath ragged as she tried to escape the danger lurking right behind her. Escaping the dense forest, a beautiful scene unfolded before them. The girl stood stunned beside Kefil, her eyes wide with astonishment and admiration. A large, shimmering lake appeared, its majestic beauty leaving her able to utter only captivated words of wonder. Standing on the windy mountainside, the girl couldn't believe her eyes when she saw a clear blue lake nestled among barren cliffs. She marveled at the miracle of nature, never expecting that such a magnificent masterpiece could be hidden in this remote and desolate place. The dragon bent down, suggesting they should take a dip since they had made it this far. The girl was still in awe. She recalled the rumors about the richness of Mount Kuguse, but seeing such an abundant water source with her own eyes was still beyond her imagination. Suddenly, Kefil let out a powerful roar, revealing its sharp teeth. Immediately after, the dragon's body began to glow brightly in the darkness, its hand holding a mysterious, sparkling object, creating a sacred and enigmatic magical atmosphere. A loud explosion shook the heavens and the earth, with black smoke billowing from a distance. The dragon stretched its neck to observe the explosion with a cold gaze, while the small girl quickly ducked to the ground to avoid the aftershock, clearly feeling the destructive power that had just been unleashed. Amidst the chaos, the girl's face showed extreme horror. She screamed in despair, her eyes wide as debris flew all around, as if the world was collapsing right before her. The girl remarked in shock that she had never seen such terrifying power, like a giant fireball. Even Kefil seemed surprised. The dragon flinched back and exclaimed upon realizing the nature of the explosion was magic. The dragon looked down at the girl with a dubious expression, causing her to look up in bewilderment. But in her mind or vision at that moment, reality was suddenly replaced by a surreal space filled with complex mathematical and physical formulas. She stood there, confused amidst a matrix of numbers and universal laws swirling around her. The girl's pupils contracted like a reptile's, a single tear rolling down from the shock. Amidst the dragon's heaven-shaking roar, she realized in horror that what had just flashed through her mind were the formulas that constitute magic. A terrifying and powerful enlightenment. Sweat poured down the girl's stunned face. A deafening explosion rang out again, and from within the thick smoke and fire, the imposing figure of a mysterious creature still stood, calm as if challenging all destruction. With an expression of disbelief, the girl turned to look at her giant companion. A crazy but convincing thought popped into her head. Could it be that this dragon was trying to teach her how to use magic? The girl tremblingly wondered if she truly possessed the ability to use magic. In response to her doubt, the dragon bowed its head and let out a low, powerful confirming growl, like a teacher acknowledging a student's potential. Her heart pounding, the girl frantically held out her hands as she saw the dragon growling threateningly, as if pressuring her to act immediately. In a state of extreme fear, she screamed a commitment that she understood and would try to do what it wanted, even though she was still trembling. The girl concentrated intensely, extending her hand forward. The complex physical formulas reappeared, swirling and exploding into a fierce stream of energy. The ensuing explosion forced the girl to endure immense pressure, her breathing becoming labored and painful. Mustering all her strength and concentration, the girl shouted the spell, "Fireball!" releasing the energy she had just created from her body. From her hand, a terrifying explosion was unleashed, creating a dark, churning cloud that tore through the space in front of her. The destructive power of the attack shook the heavens and the earth, while she stood there, hair blowing in the wind, witnessing the result of her own power. Looking at the column of white smoke billowing up, the girl couldn't hide her extreme excitement. She cheered in amazement upon realizing she could actually use magic, her eyes wide as she looked at her hands, as if she had just found a priceless treasure. However, joy quickly gave way to doubt. The girl looked down at her hands, questioning why she could cast magic at such a terrifying level of power. Clearly, the energy flowing within her was something completely abnormal. Suddenly, a giant clawed hand slammed down on the ground, startling the girl and making her turn around. However, as she looked around the desolate slope, she suddenly found herself alone. Bewilderment washed over her, and she dazedly called out Kafel's name, searching for the dragon that was just there a moment ago. It turned out Kafel was below, its wings spread majestically beside a large, defeated wolf lying sprawled on the ground. The girl watched from a distance, both admiring the dragon's strength and feeling relieved that the danger had been dealt with. But then the girl screamed in horror when she discovered the beast was still breathing. Before she could compose herself, Kafel's clawed hand reached out and touched the creature. She cried out hastily, trying to stop the dragon from doing anything more reckless or cruel. The next scene left the girl speechless. The ferocious wolf lunged to attack, while Kafel was in freefall with a terrified expression. She covered her face in shock, not understanding what Kafel was planning by letting its guard down like that, especially when she herself was powerless against the mountain beast's strength. Everything gradually became clear. It turned out the dragon had intentionally taught her magic because it realized she wasn't strong enough to defeat the beast on her own. It was a harsh combat lesson that Kafel had prepared for her. Understanding Kafel's intention, the girl no longer hesitated. She gathered all her strength, yelled, and unleashed her most powerful fireball at the enemy, her eyes blazing with high resolve. The explosion passed, but the wolf still stood firm and growled ferociously. The girl gritted her teeth, realizing one blow wasn't enough to take it down. Without giving her a moment's rest, the beast continued to charge, forcing her to launch fireballs repeatedly to stop it. The beast's speed was too fast, causing the girl difficulty. With sweat pouring down, she told herself she had to find a way to stop its movement. Even if just for a brief moment, it would be enough to turn the tide. Quick as a flash, the girl swung her hand to create a distracting blow, causing the beast to pause. Seizing that golden opportunity, she followed up with a direct fireball. This time, the flames engulfed the wolf, creating a concussive blast that finished off the enemy. Kefil observed the battle's outcome with a satisfied gaze. The girl stood there panting, clutching her chest to calm herself after the overexertion. In front of them, the beast's corpse was burning fiercely, marking the end of the tense confrontation. The brilliant victory made the girl forget all her fatigue. She flashed a radiant smile, her eyes crinkling with joy, and made a V sign for victory with her hand, savoring the complete happiness of a rare, peaceful moment. The story shifts to a completely different scene, at the branch of a majestic guild. The massive structure with its soaring arches and intricate carvings exuded the solemnity and power of the place. The quiet of the hall was suddenly broken by a loud, thunder-like noise. The receptionist behind the counter jumped, her eyes widening in astonishment towards the source of the sound, her face flushed with extreme surprise. A burly man with a cocky smile made a dramatic entrance. He leaned on the desk, tilting forward and calling out a confident "Yo," as if his presence was the center of all attention. An older man with a cunning look mentioned the name 7 Dice meaningfully. Instantly, the woman opposite him recognized an old acquaintance and greeted with a bright smile. "Long time no see, Gamel," opening up stories of the past and secrets soon to be revealed. At the guild branch with its massive architecture, a female employee joyfully welcomed Gamel, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. The rugged man responded with a friendly smirk, marking a familiar reunion between old colleagues. However, the atmosphere changed abruptly as Gamel angrily turned his back on the employee, who was bowing her head in fear. His rage exploded, and he roared that he had been deceived. His face contorted in anger as he swung a fist into the air. Turning to the young girl trembling in fear, Gamel questioned her about the mission she had assigned. He screamed, asking why dire wolves were mentioned when in reality, he only faced low-level goblins, his disappointment clear on his face as he recalled the weak enemies. In the solemn main hall, an angry voice rang out from someone calling himself the 7th Dice, who felt insulted for having to take on cheap jobs. In response to his arrogance was only a flurry of earnest and urgent apologies from the person opposite him. Gamel's anger had not subsided. He shouted bitterly because the expedition's reward had been cut to less than 20%, terrifying the girl beside him. Witnessing the scene, onlookers began to whisper amongst themselves, wondering if this was normal or if the man was talking nonsense. A calm woman with glasses asserted that this was normal. Meanwhile, 2 staff members tried to defuse the situation with sincere apologies, but Gamel could only turn back to look at them with a stunned and confused expression. The knowledgeable woman continued to explain, adjusting her glasses and stating in a serious tone that the guild's investigations are not perfect, so there is always a risk of mission failure or incorrect information. A calm man pointed out that Gamel had never encountered this problem before thanks to the thorough assessments of the former manager. Hearing this, Gamel was shocked, realizing that his perfect record of never missing a target might not have been due to luck. Everyone began to praise the former manager, who had worked with absolute perfection, reading reports and predicting risks for every mission. Gamel and the others were stunned to realize that the guy had been silently shouldering everything, even though they had once looked down on him and left everything in his hands. Unable to accept the truth, Gamel slammed his hand on the table, sending wood splinters flying. In a fit of desperation mixed with anger, he roared an order for the staff to give him another mission immediately. That boorish act was immediately punished. Stone-faced supervisors appeared, warning Gamel to maintain order and informing him that he would be penalized for destroying property in the guild hall. Outside the massive building, a helpless curse rang out. Gamel was drenched in sweat, his face contorted in stress and anguish as he faced the consequences of his recent thoughtless actions. As Gamel was pondering his adventurer's license and the possibility that someone was still alive, a panicked comrade suddenly rushed over. This person shouted for Gamel to look at something, causing him to whip around with a horrified expression. Gamel's eyes widened completely upon seeing the evidence on the table. An old card inscribed with the word, "Missing." Below it were the person's stats. Despite a low level, their vitality and magic stats were absurdly high, hinting at a terrible mystery. The entire adventure party couldn't believe their eyes, panicking and assuming the device was broken because no human could be that strong. However, the displayed number remained steadfast, a power far exceeding even the country's highest-level heroes. A trembling middle-aged man hypothesized that the device had short-circuited after the person's death at Dragon Mountain. The crowd clamored in agreement and turned to seek confirmation from Gamel, who could only clench his fist and nod in acknowledgement under extreme tension. The scene shifts to a dry grassy field, where a curly-haired man lies motionless as if dead. A voice firmly asserts that he is definitely no longer alive, his cold body left in the middle of the wasteland. The space falls into silence, with only the sound of wind whistling through blank book pages, signaling a transition or a meaningful pause in the story's flow. In another, warmer setting, a young girl cheerfully says good morning to her giant companion, Kefil. In response to her enthusiasm, the black dragon lets out a soft grunt from its throat, showing the strange bond between the two different creatures. Immediately following is a scene of a wild hunt, as the dragon clamps its prey tightly in its sharp teeth. In the distance, the small girl is running hurriedly, carrying a large cylindrical object on her shoulder, seemingly preparing for some task. The girl smiled as she reminisced about the old days, recalling Kefil's endearing habit. Before every trip, it would always carefully say goodbye and inform her, a thoughtful gesture that contrasted with the ferocious appearance of a dragon. But cruel reality suddenly struck. The girl screamed in horror as she witnessed a giant foot accidentally crush an egg on the ground. That moment was like an omen of destruction concerning both her and the unborn creature. A giant dragon soared in the sky, casting a black shadow over the ground where the small girl stood. Despite facing the mighty creature, the girl stood firm amidst the swirling energy and dust, creating a dramatic confrontation. Returning to the past, the little girl stood waving goodbye to the dragon flying away. With an innocent smile, she shouted a wish for a safe trip, completely unaware of the events that were about to unfold. At the scene of the shattered egg, the girl, now truly called Lucilla, stood silently in thought. She mused that if not for the terrible disaster years ago that destroyed this cocoon, she might not have survived to this day. Suddenly, a strange noise startled Lucilla. She cried out in pain as something made contact with her hand. Looking down at the shattered egg at her feet, she wondered in shock what kind of creature had been inside it. To her horror, from within the shattered shell, a pale human hand suddenly reached out towards the sky. Lucilla froze when she saw blood, and fear enveloped her at this bizarre sight. Immediately after, the ground shook violently, and sharp spikes like monster fangs erupted from the earth. Lucilla recoiled in panic, her mind reeling with the thought that she was facing a dangerous mutant monster. Before she could react, the ground exploded with terrifying force, throwing everything around. The girl's piercing scream echoed amidst the screen of smoke, dust, and flying debris. From within the dust, a furry monster with sharp teeth appeared, growling menacingly as it approached Kefil's egg. Lucilla realized its target and was horrified to see the precious relic of her dragon friend being threatened. The girl quickly understood that this creature had come to devour the dragon's residual power. Standing protectively in front of the glowing, levitating entity, the girl braced herself for an unequal fight. Lucilla was pushed back by an invisible pressure, thinking in panic that if she didn't stop it, it would devour everything that remained. Her gaze flickered wildly as she looked around, desperately trying to find a way to turn the situation around. Knocked far back, Lucilla realized with a shock that there was more than one enemy. She counted 2, then 3 invisible monsters surrounding her, pack hunters capable of inflicting sharp cuts that bled little. The truth was revealed. They were Kamaitashi. 3 weasel-like monsters materialized with sharp claws and fangs, ready to tear apart any prey that dared to stand in their way. This was a species of monster possessing a strange power of invisibility. The 3 brothers always hunted together as a single unit, becoming a terror to anyone they encountered. Without hesitation, Lucilla launched a black fireball at the enemy, but the attack left her exhausted and coughing violently. Exploiting that opening, the monsters counterattacked, knocking her to the ground, where she gritted her teeth in anger at her own weakness. Suppressing the pain, the girl cleverly set a trap in the darkness. She recalled the Kamaitashi's triangular formation hunting tactic, and a bold counterattack plan flashed in her mind. Lucilla shot forward like an arrow, faltering for a moment in pain but quickly regaining her balance. As soon as she landed, she immediately spun around, mustering all her strength to chant and unleash a blazing fireball. Her face was drenched in sweat from the tense wait for the result. A sound of impact rang out, and Lucilla stood firm on trembling legs, her gaze fixed resolutely on the thick cloud of dust and smoke. Her follow-up blow hit its mark, destroying the target with a loud explosion. Lucilla screamed in excitement that she had succeeded, her joy bursting forth after the life-or-death moments. The growls of giant creatures echoed nearby, but Lucilla collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Even so, she wore a satisfied smile for having successfully lured the monsters into the mine as planned. The ground trembled violently, heralding a new, even more terrifying threat. Lucilla scrambled to flee for her life as the giant black shadow of a pair of wings enveloped her, a chilling rustling sound pursuing her closely from behind. The giant dragon appeared, hovering in the air with terrifying majesty. Below, the small girl knelt, her arms outstretched as she focused her magical energy, ready for a final gamble to protect what she cherished. In the moment of confrontation, the girl's eyes widened in astonishment, tears welling up as she uttered the name, Kafel. It seemed she recognized something familiar in the fearsome creature. The dragon landed with a thud, but instead of attacking, it extended its giant tongue and gently licked the girl's face. This unexpectedly intimate act left Lucilla stunned, her fear giving way to utter shock. A painful memory flooded back, the image of a heavily injured person whispering an apology. That person collapsed in despair, their hand reaching out helplessly, blaming themselves for not being able to protect everything completely. Returning to the present, the girl looked down at the giant limb lying motionless beside her. With a sad and worried gaze, she softly called Kafel's name, hoping for a response from her large friend. The scene shifted between a bush of blooming flowers in a crater and a shattered eggshell lying desolate. The contrast between life and ruin evoked a lingering sadness for what was lost and what remained after the tragedy. A close-up of the dragon's face appeared, powerful and imposing. Its sharp teeth and rough scales were a testament to the wild strength it possessed. The dragon opened its mouth and spewed a stream of dark energy, violently tearing up the ground. Lucilla stood staring, both amazed and terrified by the destructive power unfolding right before her eyes. The girl realized the dragon was trying to destroy the traces of the eggshell to protect the nest from being targeted. Seeing that sacrifice, and hearing it utter her name, she understood it was doing everything for her. With reverence, Lucilla dropped a white lily into the dark stream of energy as a farewell. She whispered a dedication to the deceased, while the silhouette of a small dragon and a pair of human legs appeared faintly in the smoke of memory. In the gloomy forest, the giant dragon stood imposingly opposite the small human figure. Swirls of black energy coiled around them, marking a fateful moment, full of tragedy and mystery. The scene changes to a guild branch in a bustling coastal city. Tim, a warrior from the Golden Helm Party, is expressing deep suspicion about the sudden and unusual decrease in the number of mutant monsters at Mount Kuguse. An official sitting opposite bowed his head in confirmation, acknowledging that recent investigations had verified this. He further revealed that these signs had actually appeared last summer but had not been given proper attention. Elsewhere, Viola, the sorceress of the Golden Helm Party, is conversing with a dragon. She appears displeased to hear news about Mount Kuguse, which was considered impregnable due to the presence of dragons and ferocious mutant monsters. In a snow-covered land, a woman is in a tense exchange with a dragon, while glancing at a child playing carefree behind her. She seems to be trying to confirm some important implication from the other party. A war map shows the strategic importance of Mount Kuguse. It once served as a barrier preventing the Maltagar's army's advance, but if this mountain were to be passed, they could directly attack the Satoru kingdom, which is supporting the opposing side. Tim scratched his head in frustration, his face darkening with worry. He surmised that this development could be the spark that ignites a large-scale war they cannot foresee. The warrior party decides to act. They cannot ignore the unusual decrease in monsters. Meanwhile, the little girl confronts the dragon, holding a mysterious string of black beads in her hand, which seems to be the key to all the unfolding secrets. Concluding the discussion, the mischievous little girl sits perched atop the giant monster's head, smiling brightly. She firmly declares to the armored warrior that they will only truly take action after they find the root cause of everything.